The cargo hauler Meridian's Hope drifted through the Kashari trade corridor like a whale through deep water. Its hull was scarred from decades of service, patched in a dozen places where micrometeors had left their marks. Inside the cramped crew quarters, tension hung thick as engine smoke. Captain Rethazar clicked his mandibles in frustration. The insectoid officer stood at the viewport, watching the distant stars with 3 of his 4 eyes while the 4th monitored the navigation display. His ship carried medical supplies desperately needed on the colony world of Theraxis Prime, but they were already 2 days behind schedule. The humans are worthless, First Officer Krell muttered from his station. The reptilian warrior's scales rippled with disgust. We should have never taken her aboard. Rethazar turned to look at the human woman sitting quietly in the corner. She had introduced herself as Sarah Chen when she'd booked passage 3 weeks ago at Station Orion 7. She was small by human standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a simple tail. She wore plain gray coveralls and kept mostly to herself, reading data pads or staring out the observation windows. She pays her fare, Rethazar replied. That is all that matters. She takes up space and resources, Krell insisted. Humans always do. They are soft creatures unsuited for the void. Sarah didn't react to the conversation. She'd heard worse in the 3 weeks aboard the Meridian's Hope. The crew of 15 barely acknowledged her existence, and when they did, it was usually with contempt or suspicion. Humans were newcomers to the Galactic Trade Union, barely a century into their membership. Most species saw them as primitive upstarts who'd gotten lucky with their faster-than-light technology. The alarm klaxon suddenly blared through the ship. Red emergency lights bathed the crew quarters in crimson. Captain to the bridge, the ship's AI announced in its synthetic voice. Multiple contacts detected. Classification, hostile. Rethzar's antennae stood straight up. He scrambled toward the bridge with Krell close behind. Sarah stayed in her seat, but her body language had changed. Her relaxed posture was gone, replaced by something alert and focused. On the bridge, the tactical officer's scales had turned pale with fear. 6 vessels, Captain. They match the profile of Caraxian raiders. Rethzar felt his blood run cold. The Caraxians were known throughout this sector as brutal pirates who took no prisoners. Their ships were fast, heavily armed, and their crews showed no mercy. A cargo hauler like the Meridian's Hope would be easy prey. Evasive maneuvers, Rethzar commanded. Send distress signals on all frequencies. The ship lurched as the pilot threw them into a desperate spiral. Through the viewscreen, Rethzar could see the enemy fighters closing in. They were sleek vessels painted in the dark red and black colors of Caraxian war clans. Each one bristled with weapons that could tear through the Meridian's Hope in minutes. They're jamming our communications, the comm officer reported. No distress signal getting through. How long until they're in weapons range? Rethzar asked. 2 minutes, maybe less. The crew worked frantically at their stations, but everyone knew the truth. The Meridian's Hope had minimal defensive weapons and no military-grade shields. They were designed to run cargo routes through safe space, not fight off raider packs. Sarah appeared at the bridge entrance. Several crew members glanced at her with irritation, wondering why the human passenger had left her quarters during an emergency. Captain, she said calmly, your starboard defense turret is offline. I know that, human, Rethzar snapped. We have bigger problems right now. Your pilot is good, Sarah continued, ignoring his tone, but he's flying a cargo pattern. Those Caraxian fighters will tear through your evasive maneuvers in 30 seconds. Krell whirled on her. You dare question our crew? Get back to your quarters before I throw you in the brig. Sarah met his eyes without flinching. I was just trying to help. We don't need help from a human, Krell snarled. The first impact rocked the ship. A warning klaxon screamed as the shields dropped to 60%. The Caraxians had opened fire. Return fire, Rethzar ordered. The Meridian's Hope's port turret spat energy bolts into the void, but the shots went wide. The Caraxian fighters were too fast, too maneuverable. They danced around the cargo hauler like predators circling wounded prey. Another impact. Shields at 40%. We need to jump to hyperspace, the navigator suggested desperately. We're too close to the asteroid field, the pilot replied. The gravitational interference will tear us apart if we try. Sarah stepped forward. Captain, I can help you. Get off my bridge, Rethzar roared. The stress was overwhelming him. His ship was dying. His crew would be slaughtered or sold as slaves. And this human wanted to waste his time. I'm a pilot, Sarah said quietly. The bridge went silent except for the alarms and the sounds of weapons fire. Every crew member turned to stare at her. What did you say? Rethzar asked. I'm a pilot. A fighter pilot. I can handle those Caraxians if you have anything on this ship that can fly. Krell laughed, a harsh barking sound. You, a fighter pilot? Humans barely know how to fly straight through open space. Another impact. Shields at 25%. The ship groaned as structural support strained under the assault. Captain, Sarah said urgently, I know you don't trust me. I know you think humans are primitive and useless. But I'm telling you the truth. Give me something to fly and I'll get those raiders off your back. Rethzar stared at her. Everything in his experience told him humans were weak. Their military incompetent, their pilots mediocre at best. But he could see something in Sarah's eyes. Confidence. Not arrogance, but the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what they could do. We have a shuttle, he said finally, in the portside bay. It has basic maneuvering thrusters and 2 light plasma cannons. That'll work, Sarah said. You're insane, Krell protested. Captain, you can't seriously consider this. Shields at 15%. Another hit like that and they'd be breached. Do it, Rethzar said. Get to the shuttle. We'll give you remote access to launch. Sarah was already running toward the bay. Behind her, she heard Krell's protests and the sounds of the ship taking more damage. She'd been honest when she said she was a pilot, but she'd left out some details. She wasn't just any fighter pilot. She was one of Earth's Ghost Squadron, the most decorated combat wing in human military history. She'd flown 73 combat missions and had never lost a wingman. She'd been on leave, taking a quiet trip back to Earth when she'd booked passage on the Meridian's Hope. That vacation was over. Sarah reached the shuttle bay and slapped the access panel. The doors hissed open, revealing the small transport vessel inside. It was old, battered, and barely armed. Perfect. She climbed into the pilot seat and her hands flew over the controls. The systems came online with a familiar hum. She pulled the safety harness tight across her chest and activated the comm system. Meridian's Hope, this is Shuttle 1, ready for launch. On the bridge, Rethzar hesitated one final moment. Then he gave the order. Launch bay doors opening. You have control, Shuttle 1. The bay doors split apart, revealing the battle outside. Sarah could see the 6 Caraxian fighters circling the cargo hauler, taking turns firing at its weakening shields. They were confident, almost lazy in their attack patterns. They thought this was just another easy kill. Sarah's lips curved into a cold smile. They have no idea, she whispered. Then she launched into the void. The shuttle shot from the Meridian's Hope like a bullet from a gun. Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision across the controls, her body already anticipating the forces of acceleration and the dance of combat that was about to begin. On the bridge of the cargo hauler, the crew watched in stunned silence as the small shuttle streaked past their view screen. Rethzar's mandibles clicked nervously. He'd just sent their only passenger into a fight against 6 military-grade fighters with nothing but an old shuttle that was meant for short-range cargo transfers. Target. Lock, the tactical officer announced suddenly. One of the Caraxian fighters is breaking formation. They're going after the shuttle. Of course they are, Krell muttered. Easy kill. The Caraxian pilot must have been thinking the same thing. His fighter peeled away from the cargo hauler and accelerated toward the shuttle. Sarah saw him coming on her tactical display. The enemy ship was 3 times the size of her shuttle, faster, and carried enough firepower to vaporize her in a single volley. She waited. The Caraxian fighter closed the distance rapidly. Sarah could see it now with her own eyes through the canopy, a dark red wedge of metal bristling with weapons. The pilot was confident, not even bothering with evasive maneuvers. Why would he? This was a cargo shuttle against a military fighter. Sarah's finger hovered over the thruster controls. Her breathing was slow and steady, her heart rate barely elevated. This was the zone, the place where time seemed to slow down and every detail became crystal clear. She'd spent 10,000 hours in simulators and real combat learning to reach this state at will. The Caraxian opened fire. Energy bolts streaked through space toward her shuttle. Sarah twisted the controls hard left and down, vectoring her thrusters in a way that shouldn't have been possible with a cargo shuttle. The enemy fire passed through empty space where she'd been a fraction of a second before. On the Meridian's Hope, several crew members gasped in surprise. That maneuver, the pilot whispered, The thrust calculations alone would take a computer several seconds to process. But Sarah didn't need calculations. She'd been flying since she was 12 years old, first in atmospheric craft on Earth, then in orbital fighters, and finally in the deep black of interstellar space. Flying wasn't something she thought about anymore. It was something she felt like breathing or walking. The Caraxian pilot realized immediately that he'd made a mistake. This wasn't a panicked civilian fleeing in terror. This was someone who knew how to fight. He tried to adjust, bringing his fighter around for another pass, but Sarah was already moving. She rolled her shuttle inverted and fired her plasma cannons in a short, controlled burst. The shots caught the Caraxian fighter on its port wing. Shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the impact, but Sarah could see the energy reading fluctuate. She damaged them. Impossible, Krell breathed from the bridge. She hit him. Lucky shot, the tactical officer said, but his voice lacked conviction. The Caraxian pilot was angry now. Sarah could tell by the way he flew, more aggressive, less controlled. He was used to prey that ran or died quickly. He wasn't used to prey that fought back effectively. He came at her again, this time with his wingman joining the attack, 2 against 1. The odds had just gotten worse. Sarah's tactical display lit up with target locks from both fighters. They were trying to box her in, force her into a kill zone where they could hit her from 2 angles at once. It was a good tactic, one that worked against most pilots. Sarah wasn't most pilots. She accelerated directly toward the first Caraxian, the one she'd already damaged. Her shuttle's engines screamed as she pushed them past their rated capacity. Warning lights flashed on her control panel, but she ignored them. She knew exactly how much stress this shuttle could handle before it broke. The Caraxians fired. Energy bolts converged on her position from 2 different vectors. The bridge crew of the Meridian's Hope watched in horror, certain they were about to witness the human's death. At the last possible instant, Sarah cut her main engines and fired her ventral thrusters at full power. The shuttle dropped like a stone, falling below the plane of battle. The Caraxian fire missed by meters, and more importantly, the second fighter's shot slammed into the first fighter's shields. Friendly fire, the tactical officer announced in disbelief. She made them shoot each other. Sarah didn't give them time to recover. She brought her shuttle back up behind the damaged fighter and fired both plasma cannons in a sustained burst. The Caraxian's shields, already weakened from her first attack and the accidental hit from his wingman, collapsed. Her plasma bolts tore into the fighter's engine assembly. The Caraxian ship exploded in a brilliant ball of orange and white fire. The bridge of the Meridian's Hope erupted in shocked exclamations. Rethzar stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just witnessed. A human flying a cargo shuttle had just destroyed a Caraxian military fighter in single combat. 1 down. Sarah's voice came over the comm, calm and professional. 5 to go. The remaining Caraxian pilots were no longer treating this as an easy kill. All 5 fighters broke off their attack on the cargo hauler and turned their attention to the shuttle. They formed up in a proper combat spread, professional and deadly. Sarah checked her shuttle's status. Shields at 70% from near misses. Engines running hot but stable. Both plasma cannons operational but showing signs of stress from the sustained fire. She had maybe 5 more good shots before they'd need to cool down. 5 shots. 5 fighters. She could work with that. The Caraxians came at her in a coordinated attack pattern, staggered so that at least 2 of them always had a firing solution on her shuttle. They were done underestimating her. This was a professional military strike now. Sarah dove toward the nearby asteroid field. The Meridian's Hope's navigator had said they couldn't jump to hyperspace because of the gravitational interference from the asteroids. But that same interference could work to her advantage. She's heading into the field, the pilot of the Meridian's Hope said. That's suicide. The navigation required to fly through there at combat speeds is impossible. Rethzar said nothing. He was beginning to suspect that Sarah Chen's definition of impossible was very different from everyone else's. Sarah wove between the asteroids with fluid grace. The rocks ranged from the size of a small building to massive chunks of stone and ice several kilometers across. She used them as cover, breaking line of sight with the pursuing fighters, forcing them to split up to chase her through the maze. The first Caraxian came around a large asteroid and found Sarah waiting for him, hovering motionless behind a smaller rock. He had just enough time to register surprise before she fired. Both plasma cannons hit him center mass. His shields held but barely, Sarah was already moving before he could return fire. She disappeared behind another asteroid, and the Caraxian pilot followed, determined not to lose his target. It was exactly what Sarah wanted him to do. She led him on a chase through the field, seeming to flee in panic. The Caraxian followed eagerly, sensing a kill. He didn't notice that Sarah was leading him in a very specific direction, using the asteroids to block his view of the larger tactical picture. He came around a massive ice asteroid at full speed and suddenly found himself face to face with two of his own wingmen coming from the other direction. All three pilots tried to evade, but they were too close, moving too fast. Sarah, hovering above them, watched as the three Caraxian fighters collided in a tangle of metal and fire. Two exploded instantly. The third spiraled away, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere. 3 down, Sarah reported. 2 active, 1 disabled. On the Meridian's Hope, the crew stared at their displays in absolute silence. In less than 15 minutes, the human had reduced a 6-fighter raider pack to just 2 operational vessels. Krell's scales had gone completely pale. "What is she?" he whispered. Rethazar finally understood. The human hadn't been lucky. She hadn't stumbled into success. Every move had been calculated, every maneuver planned. She was flying circles around pilots who'd been trained from birth for combat. "Captain," the comm officer said quietly, "I'm receiving transmissions from the remaining Caraxians. They're arguing with each other. They sound terrified." The 2 surviving Caraxian fighters had pulled back, circling at a distance. Sarah could hear their comm chatter on the military frequencies. They were debating whether to continue the fight or flee. She made the decision for them. Sarah burst from the asteroid field at attack speed, heading straight for the closer of the 2 fighters. The Caraxian pilot panicked and broke formation, trying to run. Sarah followed, her shuttle pushed to maximum acceleration. The chase lasted 30 seconds. The Caraxian was faster in a straight line, but Sarah was better. She predicted his evasion pattern, led her shots perfectly, and fired her plasma cannons one more time. The 4th fighter died in silence, swallowed by the void. The last Caraxian pilot saw his comrade die and made a choice. He turned his fighter away from the battle and jumped to hyperspace, abandoning the fight entirely. Sarah let him go. She wasn't here to chase fleeing enemies across the galaxy. She was here to protect the Meridian's Hope. She turned her battered shuttle back toward the cargo hauler and opened a comm channel. "Meridian's Hope, this is Shuttle 1. All hostile contacts neutralized or fled. Requesting permission to dock." The shuttle bay doors of the Meridian's Hope opened slowly, as if the ship itself was still processing what had just happened. Sarah guided her battered shuttle inside with gentle touches on the controls. The small craft settled onto the deck with a soft hiss of landing struts, and the bay doors sealed behind her. She sat in the pilot's seat for a moment, letting her heart rate return to normal. Her hands were steady as she shut down the shuttle systems one by one. The plasma cannons were burnt out exactly as she'd calculated. The engines were running 20 degrees hotter than safe operating temperature. The shields were at 18%. But she was alive, and so was the crew of the Meridian's Hope. Sarah unbuckled her harness and climbed out of the shuttle. The bay was empty, but she could see faces pressed against the observation window above. The entire crew seemed to be there, staring down at her. She walked toward the bay exit, her boots echoing on the metal deck. The door opened before she reached it. Captain Rethazar stood there, his 4 eyes all focused on her. Behind him, she could see First Officer Krell and at least a dozen other crew members crowding the corridor. No one spoke. Sarah stopped a few feet from the captain. "Sorry about the shuttle," she said. "The plasma cannons are fried and the engines need a full maintenance cycle before they're safe to use again." Rethazar's mandibles clicked slowly. "You destroyed 4 Caraxian fighters and drove off 2 more. 5 destroyed," Sarah corrected gently. "The damaged one from the collision won't make it far. Its life support was breached." 5, Rethazar repeated. He seemed to be having trouble with basic speech. "In 20 minutes. 18 minutes, actually," Sarah said. She wasn't being smug. She was just accurate. Time mattered in combat. Every second could mean the difference between life and death. Krell pushed forward, his scales flushed with emotion. "How?" he demanded. "How is that possible? You're human. Your species has barely been in space for a century. The Caraxians have been warriors for 10,000 years." Sarah met his eyes. Experience doesn't mean much if you rely on the same tactics every time. The Caraxians fought like they expected me to run or die quickly. When I did neither, they didn't know how to adapt. But the maneuvers, the ship's pilot stammered. He was a thin, gray-skinned humanoid named Vex. The calculations required for some of those vector changes, the timing necessary to use the asteroids as cover while predicting enemy positions, the way you led them into that collision, it's not possible for an organic mind to process that much data that quickly. I wasn't calculating, Sarah explained. I was flying. There's a difference, the crew exchanged confused glances. They didn't understand what she meant. Rethzar gestured toward the bridge. Come, please, I think we need to talk. Sarah followed the captain through the corridors of the cargo hauler. The crew members who had crowded around the bay door parted to let her pass, but she could feel their eyes on her. The contempt and dismissal were gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe. Or fear. On the bridge, Rethzar settled into his command chair. Sarah stood at ease in the center of the room while the senior officers gathered around. You said you were a pilot? Rethzar began carefully. But you did not mention you were a military pilot. You didn't ask, Sarah replied. And honestly, I didn't think it would come up. I was just booking passage home. Home, Krell said. From where? From the Frontier Wars, Sarah said quietly. I've been stationed out on the rim for the past 3 years. The bridge went very quiet. Even in the relatively isolated galactic core regions, everyone had heard of the Frontier Wars. It was a conflict between human colonies and the hostile alien species that inhabited the edges of known space. The fighting was brutal and constant. I did not know humans were sending military forces that far out, Rethzar said. We don't advertise it, Sarah said. Most species already think we're primitive warmongers. We figured it was better to fight our battles quietly rather than confirm everyone's worst suspicions about us. Vex, the pilot, couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. How many combat missions have you flown? 73, Sarah answered. The number hung in the air. For a species that had only been in space for a century, 73 combat missions was an extraordinary amount of experience. Most galactic military pilots considered themselves veterans after 20 missions. And your squadron? Rethzar asked. What was its designation? Sarah hesitated. This was the part she usually kept quiet about. Ghost Squadron, 7th Fighter Wing, Earth Defense Force. Several crew members gasped. Krell's scales rippled with what might have been shock. The Ghost Squadron, he said slowly. I have heard stories. They said it was human propaganda. It's real, Sarah confirmed. We're real. The stories about Ghost Squadron had spread through the galactic military networks like wildfire over the past year. They told of human pilots who flew like demons, who pulled off impossible maneuvers, who never lost a fight even when outnumbered 10-1. Most alien military analysts had dismissed the stories as human exaggeration meant to intimidate enemies. Rethzar was beginning to realize the stories might have been understated. How many pilots in your squadron? He asked. 12. Well, 11 now. We lost one pilot 6 months ago. Lost, Krell said. Killed in action? No, Sarah said softly. Retired. She got married and decided she wanted to start a family. We threw her a party before she left. The alien stared at her in confusion. In most galactic militaries, elite units lost members to death in combat, not retirement and marriage. So the 11 of you, Rethzar said carefully, are you all at this level of skill? We're all different, Sarah said. Different specialties, different strengths. But yeah, we're all trained to the same standard. She didn't mention that she was the squadron leader, or that her kill count was the highest in the unit. They were already overwhelmed enough. The comm officer suddenly spoke up from his station. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's from the Caraxian raider that escaped. Everyone turned toward the comm station. Rethzar's mandibles clicked in surprise. Put it through. The view screen flickered to life, showing a Caraxian pilot in his cockpit. His face was covered in chitinous plates, his eyes multifaceted and gleaming. He looked directly at Sarah. Human, he said in heavily accented Standard Galactic. I am War Leader Craxton. I have fought in 200 raids. I have killed warriors from 30 species. I have never fled from battle before today. Sarah didn't respond. She just waited. You have honor, Craxton continued. You fight with skill beyond your years. I will report to my clan leaders that the ship Meridian's Hope is under the protection of a human warrior. No Caraxian will touch it again. The screen went dark. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Krell made a sound that might have been laughter or disbelief. A Caraxian war leader just gave us safe passage through their territory. Because of you, Sarah shrugged. The Caraxians respect strength. I showed them strength. That's all. That is not all, Rethazar said firmly. You saved this ship and everyone on it. The medical supplies we carry will save thousands of lives on Thraxis Prime. Because of you, those people will live. He stood up from his command chair and did something Sarah had never seen an insectoid captain do. He bowed, his antennae touching the deck. On behalf of my crew and the people of Thraxis Prime, I apologize for how we treated you. I apologize for my prejudice and my dismissal of your people. You have shown me that humans are far more than I believed. One by one, the other crew members bowed as well. Even Krell, though he looked like it physically pained him. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the attention. You don't need to do that. I was just doing what needed to be done. That, Rethzar said, rising from his bow, is perhaps the most remarkable thing about you. You see this as normal, as something anyone would do. He walked over to the weapons locker on the bridge and pulled out a small medal on a ribbon. It was the Merchant Marine Combat Valor decoration, given only in the most extreme circumstances. This belongs to you, he said, offering it to Sarah. She took the medal carefully. It was warm from being stored near the engine core, and it gleamed under the bridge lights. Thank you, Captain. No, Rethazar said softly. Thank you. The rest of the journey to Thraxis Prime was very different from the first 3 weeks. The crew of the Meridian's Hope treated Sarah with respect, even warmth. Vex spent hours asking her about flying techniques. The tactical officer wanted to know about combat theory. Even Krell grudgingly admitted that he had been wrong about humans. But Sarah noticed something else too. When the crew thought she wasn't paying attention, they watched her with a new expression. Not fear exactly, but wariness, respect mixed with uncertainty. They were realizing that humanity was not what they had thought. And if one random human passenger could do what Sarah had done, what could Earth's actual military accomplish? It was a question that was starting to spread across the galaxy. Carried by stories from the frontier wars and incidents like this one, humanity had been quiet for a century, content to trade and learn from the older species. But now, slowly, the galaxy was waking up to a truth that Earth had kept mostly hidden. Humans were warriors. Perhaps the best warriors the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years, and no one had seen it coming. Thraxis Prime hung in space like a blue and green jewel. The colony world was home to 3 million beings from a dozen different species, all working together to terraform the planet and build a new civilization far from the crowded core worlds. As the Meridian's Hope approached the orbital station, Sarah stood at the observation window and watched the planet grow larger. Beautiful, isn't it? Rethzar said, coming to stand beside her. His mandibles clicked softly, and what she'd learned was his version of a contented sigh. It is, Sarah agreed. Reminds me a bit of Earth, same color of blue in the oceans. I would like to see Earth someday, Rethzar said. Before this journey, I thought I had no interest in human worlds. Now I find myself curious. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Rethzar spoke again. The station master has been informed of our arrival. He has also been informed of what happened in the Kashari corridor. The story is spreading quickly, Sarah grimaced. I was hoping to avoid that. Avoid what? Recognition for saving 17 lives and a cargo of critical medical supplies. Attention, Sarah said simply. I'm on leave. I was supposed to be taking a quiet trip home, seeing my family. Maybe lying on a beach somewhere. Instead, I'm going to arrive at Earth with everyone knowing what happened. Would that be so terrible? Rethzar asked. Sarah thought about it. My squadron likes to operate quietly. When people know what we can do, they change how they act around us. Some get aggressive, wanting to test themselves. Others get scared. Both reactions make our jobs harder. Perhaps, Rethzar said thoughtfully. But there is value in people knowing the truth. For too long, the galaxy has underestimated humanity. That underestimation has led to prejudice and dismissal. What you did showed the truth. The Meridian's Hope docked at the orbital station with practiced ease. Sarah gathered her few belongings and prepared to disembark. She'd be transferring to a passenger liner heading to Earth, a proper ship with comfortable quarters and entertainment. After 3 weeks on a cargo hauler, she was looking forward to it. The crew lined up at the airlock to say goodbye. It was a formal gesture, the kind usually reserved for dignitaries or important clients. Sarah felt awkward as she shook hands and appendages with each crew member. Vex gripped her hand with both of his. "Thank you for the lessons," he said earnestly. "I have been flying for 20 years and I learned more from watching you than from all my training." "You're a good pilot," Sarah told him honestly. "You just needed to trust your instincts more." When she reached Krell, the reptilian officer hesitated before extending his clawed hand. "I was wrong about you," he said stiffly, "and about your species. I will not make that mistake again." "We all have biases," Sarah replied, shaking his hand. "The important thing is being willing to change when we learn better." Finally, she reached Rethazar. The captain held out a datapad. "My personal contact information," he explained. "If you ever need passage anywhere, the Meridian's Hope is at your service. And if you ever visit Theraxis Prime, my family would be honored to host you." Sarah took the pad and felt a warmth in her chest. "Thank you, Captain. That means a lot." "No," Rethazar said, clicking his mandibles in what she now recognized as a smile. "Thank you, Sarah Chen of Ghost Squadron. Safe travels." She walked through the airlock and into the bustle of the orbital station. The transition was jarring after weeks on the quiet cargo hauler. Thousands of beings moved through the corridors, heading to ships or businesses or homes. The air was filled with a dozen different languages and the sounds of commerce and life. Sarah found her way to the passenger terminal and checked in for her transfer. The clerk, a blue-skinned humanoid, processed her ticket quickly and professionally. If the story of the Caraxian raiders had reached the station yet, this clerk didn't show any sign of knowing. She had 3 hours before her liner departed. So Sarah found a quiet cafe and ordered something that was supposedly coffee, but tasted more like burnt nuts. She settled into a corner booth and pulled out her personal datapad to catch up on messages. There were dozens of them. Her squadron mates checking in, her mother worried about when she'd arrive home, her younger brother asking if she'd bring him anything interesting from the outer systems. Normal life, the kind of life that existed between the moments of violence and combat. She was halfway through responding to her brother when a shadow fell across her table. Sarah looked up to see a tall humanoid standing there. He had gray skin marked with blue patterns that indicated his species, though Sarah couldn't immediately place which one. He wore the uniform of station security. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you Sarah Chen?" Sarah's instincts immediately went on alert. "I am. Is there a problem?" "No problem at all," the security officer assured her. "My name is Officer Thalrin. The station master would like to speak with you if you have time before your departure." Sarah considered refusing, but curiosity won out. "All right, lead the way." They walked through the station corridors, moving away from the busy commercial sections toward the administrative areas. Other security personnel they passed nodded respectfully to Thalrin and gave Sarah curious looks. Word had definitely spread. The station master's office was spacious and well-appointed, with a large window showing the curve of Theraxis Prime below. Behind the desk sat a being Sarah recognized as a Valorian, one of the elder species of the galaxy. She had pale purple skin and large eyes that held millennia of genetic memory. "Lieutenant Chen," the station master said, rising from her seat. "Thank you for coming. I am Station Master Elenya Vareth." "Just Sarah is fine," Sarah replied. "I'm on leave." "Of course." Elenya gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Can I offer you refreshment? Real Earth coffee, perhaps? I keep a supply for human visitors." Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. "That would be amazing, actually." A few moments later, she held a cup of genuine coffee, hot and aromatic. The first sip was like coming home. "I wanted to thank you personally," Elenya said, settling back into her chair. "The medical supplies on the Meridian's Hope are desperately needed. We have a viral outbreak in the southern settlements. Without those supplies, we would have lost hundreds, perhaps thousands of colonists. I was glad to help," Sarah said simply. "Captain Rethazar sent me his full sensor logs of the engagement," Elenya continued. She tapped her desk console and a holographic display appeared between them, showing the tactical recording of Sarah's fight with the Caraxian raiders. "I have reviewed it several times. What you accomplished is remarkable." Sarah watched the playback in silence. Seeing it from an outside perspective was strange. She could see the patterns of her own flying, the way she'd maneuvered the shuttle in ways that should have been impossible. To her, in the moment, it had all made perfect sense. Watching it now, she could understand why the crew had been so shocked. I served in the Valorian Defense Fleet for 60 years, Elenya said quietly. I have seen thousands of combat recordings from the greatest pilots in the galaxy. I have never seen anything quite like this. The Caraxians made mistakes, Sarah said. They underestimated their opponent. That's always fatal in combat. They did, Elenya agreed. But you did more than exploit their mistakes. You predicted their movements before they made them. You used physics and timing in ways that required perfect precision, and you did it all in a cargo shuttle that was never meant for combat. She leaned forward, her ancient eyes studying Sarah carefully. This is not the first time I have heard stories about human pilots. There are whispers coming from the frontier wars. Tales of human fighters doing impossible things. I dismissed them as propaganda at first. Now I wonder if I was wrong. Sarah took another sip of coffee, choosing her words carefully. Earth has been training fighter pilots for centuries. We had military aviation long before we reached space. When we developed FTL technology, we already had a deep understanding of atmospheric and orbital combat. But you have only been in deep space for 100 years, Elenya pointed out. Most species take centuries to develop truly effective space combat doctrine. We had a head start, Sarah explained. On Earth, we fought each other for thousands of years. Terrible wars, devastating conflicts. We learned from all that bloodshed. When we reached the stars, we brought that knowledge with us. Elenya was quiet for a moment. The galaxy has been peaceful for a very long time, she said finally. Oh, there are conflicts, but nothing like the wars of the ancient times. Most species have forgotten what it means to truly fight for survival. The Caraxians are raiders and pirates, but even they follow certain rules. Certain patterns that can be exploited. Sarah said exactly. Elenya stood and walked to the window, gazing down at Thraxis Prime. I think the galaxy is about to have a reckoning. We have all become comfortable, complacent. And then humanity arrives, a species that has never known true peace, that has been fighting and competing and struggling since the dawn of its existence. We're not warmongers, Sarah said quickly. We don't want conflict, I know, Elenya replied. I have read about Earth's history. I know that most humans want peace, want to build and create rather than destroy. But you have the capacity for violence when necessary, and you have refined that capacity to an art form. She turned back to face Sarah. That is what makes humanity so remarkable and so frightening. The celestial dream was 3 days into its journey to Earth when Sarah realized she had become famous. Not in the way celebrities were famous, but in the way that military victories spread through tight-knit communities. Everywhere she went on the ship, she noticed other passengers whispering and pointing. Some approached her directly, asking if she was the pilot from the Kashari corridor incident. Sarah tried to be polite, but kept the conversations brief. She wasn't comfortable with the attention, but it was becoming clear that Elenya had been right. The story was spreading, and it was growing with each retelling. On the third night, she was having dinner in one of the quieter ship restaurants when a young human man approached her table. He couldn't have been more than 20 with nervous energy and bright eyes. Excuse me, he said hesitantly. Are you Lieutenant Sarah Chen? Sarah looked up from her meal. Just Sarah, and yes, I am. I'm David Okonkwo, the young man said, practically vibrating with excitement. I'm a flight school cadet, second year at Luna Academy. I saw the tactical recording of your fight. It's being analyzed in all our classes now. That caught Sarah's attention. It's already being used for training. Are you kidding? It's the most talked about engagement in the entire academy. Our instructors say you executed at least 4 maneuvers that aren't in any textbook. They're trying to figure out how you even thought of some of those moves. David pulled out a data pad without being invited and sat down across from her. Sarah should have been annoyed, but his enthusiasm was infectious. This moment here, David said, pulling up the tactical recording, when you dropped below the firing solution of both fighters and made them hit each other. Our instructor said the timing window for that maneuver was less than 0.3 seconds. He said even with computer assistance, most pilots couldn't pull it off. I didn't use computer assistance, Sarah said. David stared at her. You what? The shuttle's tactical computer was too slow. I was flying manual the whole time, but that's impossible. The calculations alone would take a human brain several seconds to process, and you had to execute in real time. Sarah smiled. You don't calculate in combat, you feel. You train until your body knows what to do before your mind can think about it. The math happens unconsciously. They don't teach us that at the academy, David said quietly. They should, Sarah replied. She gestured to the seat David had already taken. Sit. Let me show you something. For the next hour, Sarah walked the young cadet through the engagement, not from a tactical perspective but from an experiential one. She explained how she'd read the enemy pilots' intentions from their flight patterns, how she'd used the asteroids not just as cover, but as psychological tools to make the Caraxians doubt themselves. The biggest advantage I had wasn't skill or experience, Sarah explained. It was understanding. I understood that the Caraxians were flying by doctrine, following patterns they'd been taught. Once I recognized their doctrine, I could predict their movements. But you only saw them for a few seconds before the fight started, David protested. A few seconds is enough. The way they formed up, the spacing between ships, the angle of attack they chose. All of that told me what kind of training they'd received and how they'd likely react to different situations. David was recording everything on his data pad, his eyes wide. This is incredible. We spend months learning formations and attack patterns, but nobody talks about reading enemy behavior like this. That's because most galactic militaries don't think about combat the way humans do, Sarah said. They see it as a technical problem. Apply the right tactics, use the right formations, and victory follows logically. But combat isn't logical. It's psychological, emotional, instinctive. She paused, trying to find the right words. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've had wars where victory wasn't about having better technology, but about understanding your enemy better. We learned that in combat, the mind matters as much as the machine. Is that why Ghost Squadron is so effective? David asked. Ghost Squadron is effective because we train differently than everyone else. We don't just learn to fly. We learn to think like our opponents, to understand different species' psychologies and combat doctrines. We study history, military theory, even art and culture, because all of that informs how someone will fight. David was quiet for a moment, processing everything. They say there are only 12 of you. 11 now? 12 pilots, yes. But hundreds of support staff, analysts, mechanics, and strategists. Ghost Squadron isn't just the people in the cockpits. Do you think, David said slowly, that I could ever be that good? Sarah looked at the young cadet, seeing his hope and determination. Yes, she said honestly, if you're willing to work for it. Natural talent only gets you so far. Everything else is practice, study, and experience, or will you tell me how to train? David asked. What should I focus on? Sarah thought about it. Learn to fly everything. Not just fighters, but cargo haulers, shuttles, atmospheric craft. Every type of vessel will teach you something different. And study non-human species. Learn how they think, how their biology affects their combat styles. A Caraxian doesn't perceive time the same way a human does. That affects their reaction speeds and decision-making. She pulled up a training program on his data pad. Here, this is a simulator protocol Ghost Squadron uses. It puts you in scenarios where you're outnumbered and outgunned, and you have to survive using creativity rather than firepower. Practice this every day. David looked at the program like she'd handed him a treasure map. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. After the young cadet left, Sarah sat alone with her thoughts. She realized that David represented something important. He was the next generation. Young pilots who would grow up knowing that humans could compete with any species in the galaxy. They wouldn't have the uncertainty and self-doubt that her generation had struggled with. The rest of the journey was similar. More passengers approached her, asking questions, wanting advice, seeking autographs. Sarah handled it all as gracefully as she could. But she was exhausted by the time the celestial dream reached Earth orbit. Home. The blue and white sphere filled the view screen, and Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. She'd been gone for 3 years, and there had been times on the frontier when she'd wondered if she'd ever see Earth again. The liner docked at Earth Station 1, the massive orbital facility that served as the gateway to humanity's homeworld. Sarah gathered her belongings and prepared to disembark, already planning the transport down to the surface where her family waited. But when she exited the ship, there was a reception committee waiting. Not family, but military. Commander Rachel Price stood at the head of a small group of officers, her sharp eyes taking in everything. Lieutenant Chen, Commander Price said formally. Welcome home. Sarah snapped to attention and saluted. Commander, I wasn't expecting a military escort. You destroyed 5 enemy fighters in 18 minutes using a cargo shuttle, Price replied. What exactly were you expecting? A quiet trip home? Sarah said hopefully. Price's stern expression cracked into a brief smile. Not a chance. Command wants a full debriefing. The media wants interviews, and half the military brass wants to analyze every second of your engagement. You're the hottest topic in Earth's military right now. Sarah groaned. Can I at least see my family first? Already arranged, Price said, her expression softening. You have 24 hours of personal time. After that, you're mine for the next week. They walked through the station corridors, Price's escort keeping curious onlookers at a distance. The engagement is all anyone in the pilot community can talk about, Price said quietly. You've raised expectations. Every cadet in every flight school now thinks they can take on multiple enemy fighters single-handedly. That's not what I wanted, Sarah protested. I know, but you need to understand what you've done. For years, humanity has been playing it safe, trying not to draw attention, worried about how the older species would react if they knew our true capabilities. You've forced that conversation to happen. They reached a private docking bay where a military transport waited to take Sarah to the surface. Price stopped at the entrance. There's going to be pressure on you, the commander said. Political pressure, media pressure, pressure from within our own military. Some people will want to use you as a propaganda tool. Others will want to downplay what you did to avoid scaring our galactic neighbors. You need to be ready for that. I'm just a pilot, Commander. I did my job. You're more than that now, Price said firmly. Whether you like it or not, you're a symbol. You've shown the galaxy what a human pilot can do. That has consequences, good and bad, Sarah nodded slowly. She'd been thinking about this since her conversation with Station Master Elenia. What do you want me to do? Tell the truth, Price said simply. No exaggeration, no false modesty. Just explain what happened and why you made the decisions you made. Let the chips fall where they may. And Ghost Squadron? Sarah asked. What happens to our operational security? That's above my pay grade, Price admitted. But I suspect the secret is out. If one Ghost Squadron pilot can do what you did, the galaxy will assume all of you can. We might have to operate differently going forward. Sarah's mother cried when she saw her. Not sad tears, but the overwhelming relief of a parent who had spent 3 years worrying whether her daughter would come home. The Chen family home in San Francisco looked exactly as Sarah remembered it. From the garden her mother tended with obsessive care to the old furniture that had been in the family for generations. Her brother Marcus had grown. He'd been 17 when she left, a gangly teenager. Now he was 20, taller than Sarah and studying aerospace engineering at university. He wrapped her in a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. You're a legend, Marcus said, grinning. My sister is an actual legend. Do you know how many messages I've gotten from people asking if we're related? Marcus, let your sister breathe, their mother scolded, but she was smiling. Come inside, I made your favorite meal. The house smelled like home, like cooking and old wood and the jasmine incense their mother always burned. Sarah felt herself relax for the first time in weeks. Here she wasn't Lieutenant Chen or the pilot from the Kashari corridor. She was just Sarah, daughter and sister. Over dinner, her family asked questions, not about combat or tactics, but about her journey. Had she seen interesting places? Made friends? Was she eating properly? The normal concerns of people who loved her. But eventually, Marcus couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. The recording is everywhere, he said. I must have watched it 100 times. How did you even think to use the asteroids that way? Marcus, their mother warned. It's okay, Mom, Sarah said. She looked at her brother. Honestly, I didn't think about it. I saw the tactical situation, saw the resources available, and my brain just processed it all automatically. It's like when you solve a complex engineering problem. You don't consciously work through every equation. The patterns just emerge, but you were outnumbered 6-1, Marcus pressed. In a shuttle that wasn't meant for combat. Most people would have panicked. Most people aren't trained like Ghost Squadron pilots, Sarah said. We drill for situations like that constantly. Being outnumbered is almost normal for us. Her mother set down her chopsticks. Is it always like that? She asked quietly. On the frontier? Are you always outnumbered and in danger? Sarah considered lying, but her mother deserved the truth. Sometimes, yeah. The frontier is contested space. The species out there don't want humans expanding into their territory, so they push back hard. Ghost Squadron's job is to push back harder. And you've been doing this for 3 years, her mother said softly. Fighting battles we never hear about, risking your life so colonies can survive. Someone has to, Sarah replied, and I'm good at it. You're more than good, Marcus said. The analysis I've read says you're possibly the best combat pilot humanity has ever produced. Sarah laughed. That's exaggeration. There are pilots in Ghost Squadron who are better than me in specific areas. I'm just well-rounded. You're the squadron leader, her mother pointed out. They wouldn't give you that position if you weren't the best. Commander Price is the squadron leader, Sarah corrected. I'm just her second. For now, Marcus said with a knowing grin. They finished dinner, and Sarah helped clean up despite her mother's protests. It was good to do something normal, something that had nothing to do with military service or interstellar politics. She washed dishes while her mother dried them, a routine they'd performed thousands of times before she joined the military. Are you happy? Her mother asked suddenly. With this life you've chosen? Sarah thought about it. Yes, she said finally. I won't pretend it's easy or that I don't see things that give me nightmares. But I'm protecting people, Mom. I'm making a difference. And I'm good at what I do. That matters. Her mother nodded slowly. Just promise me you'll come home when you can. Don't stay away for 3 more years. I promise, Sarah said. That night Sarah slept in her old bedroom. Her mother had kept it exactly as she'd left it, like a shrine to the daughter who'd gone to war. Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and thinking about everything that had happened since she'd booked passage on the Meridian's Hope. She just wanted a quiet trip home. Instead, she'd started something that might change how the galaxy viewed humanity. Station Master Elenya had been right. The consequences were already spreading. The next morning, Sarah had breakfast with her family, and then Commander Price's transport arrived to take her back to Earth Station 1. Her mother hugged her tightly. Be careful up there, she whispered. Always am, Sarah replied. The military complex where the debriefing took place was deep inside Earth Station 1, in sections that required multiple security clearances to access. Commander Price met her at the entrance along with 3 other Ghost Squadron pilots who'd been recalled from various assignments. Chen, Lieutenant James Rodriguez said, grinning. Heard you had an interesting vacation. Couldn't even take a simple cargo transport without starting a fight, Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka added, shaking her head in mock disappointment. Sarah hugged both of them. It was good to see familiar faces. You're just jealous I got all the action while you two were sitting around on frontier bases. Sitting around, Rodriguez protested. I flew 4 missions last week. And I destroyed 5 fighters in 18 minutes, Sarah countered. Quality over quantity. Price led them into a large briefing room where at least 20 officers waited. Sarah recognized Admiral Martinez, head of Earth Defense Forces Fighter Command, along with several generals and civilian officials from the United Earth government. Lieutenant Chen, Admiral Martinez said, gesturing to a seat at the front of the room. Thank you for coming. We have a lot to discuss. For the next 4 hours, Sarah went through every detail of the engagement. They played the tactical recording, dozens of times pausing to analyze specific maneuvers. Military analysts asked technical questions about thrust vectors and targeting solutions. Psychologists wanted to know her decision-making process. Political advisors asked about the Caraxian war leader's transmission and what it might mean for human-Caraxian relations. Sarah answered everything honestly, just as Commander Price had instructed. She didn't exaggerate her accomplishments, but she didn't downplay them either. She simply explained what had happened and why she'd made each decision. The key factor, Admiral Martinez said finally, is that you achieved this result with minimal resources and no backup. That suggests human pilots have a significant advantage over galactic opponents. With respect, Admiral, Sarah said, I had advantages that most human pilots don't. 3 years of constant combat experience on the frontier, training from Ghost Squadron, which is the most elite program we have, and honestly, I got lucky. The Caraxians made mistakes. You created situations where they would make mistakes, one of the analysts corrected. That's different from luck. Perhaps, Sarah conceded. But I want to be clear. Not every human pilot could do what I did. It takes training, experience, and a specific mindset. We shouldn't assume that all our pilots are suddenly invincible. Noted, Martinez said. However, this engagement has had unexpected political effects. We're receiving communications from multiple galactic governments. Some are congratulatory. Others are requesting information about our military capabilities, and a few are expressing concern about what they call human militarism. We saved a cargo hauler from pirates, Sarah said, confused. How is that militarism? Because you did it too well, one of the civilian officials explained. He was a thin man with tired eyes named Director Chen, no relation. You proved that even an off-duty human pilot, using civilian equipment, can defeat multiple military-grade fighters. That scares people. It suggests Earth has been hiding its true strength. We haven't been hiding anything, Sarah protested. We just haven't been advertising. There's a difference. The galaxy doesn't see it that way, Director Chen replied. For a century, humanity has been the new species, the rookies learning from older civilizations. Now suddenly we're revealed to be potentially the most dangerous military power in known space. That shifts the entire balance of galactic politics. Admiral Martinez leaned forward. Lieutenant Chen, I need to ask you a direct question. In your professional opinion, how would human military forces fare in a full-scale conflict with other galactic powers? Sarah chose her words carefully. That depends on many factors: numbers, technology, logistics, political will. But based on what I've seen fighting on the frontier, if it came down to pure combat effectiveness, pilot for pilot and ship for ship, humans would have an advantage. The room went very quiet. You're certain? Martinez asked. Yes, sir. We think differently than most galactic species. We're more adaptable, more creative, more willing to break rules and try unconventional tactics. That matters in combat. And this is true across human military forces, not just Ghost Squadron. Ghost Squadron represents the peak of human capability, Sarah said. But our average pilot with standard training is still formidable by galactic standards. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Most galactic species have been at peace for centuries. That gives us an edge. One of the generals spoke up. We need to consider how to proceed. Do we continue keeping our capabilities quiet? Or do we reveal more and use it as leverage in galactic politics?
Neither, Sarah said, surprising herself with her boldness.
Everyone turned to look at her. Sorry, sir, but I think both those approaches are wrong. Explain, Martinez said. If we keep hiding, we look deceptive. The galaxy will wonder what else we're not telling them. But if we deliberately reveal our strength to intimidate or leverage, we look aggressive. Instead, we should just be honest. When situations arise, we respond appropriately. We protect our interests, defend our allies, and let our actions speak for themselves. Like you did on the Meridian's Hope, Commander Price said. Exactly. I didn't fly that shuttle to make a political statement or prove human superiority. I did it because people needed help and I had the skills to help them. If we approach every situation with that mindset, the galaxy will respect us for our actions, not fear us for our capabilities. Director Chen nodded slowly. There's wisdom in that, though it may be too late to completely avoid the fear reaction. Fear fades, Sarah said. Respect lasts. The briefing continued for several more hours, but the tone had shifted. Instead of debating how to use the incident politically, they discussed how to be prepared for similar situations. How to train pilots better. How to integrate the lessons Sarah had demonstrated into standard military doctrine. Finally, Admiral Martinez dismissed everyone except Sarah, Commander Price, and a few senior officers. Lieutenant Chen, he said seriously, what you did has accelerated humanity's timeline. We were planning to slowly reveal our capabilities over the next decade. Instead, the galaxy now knows what we're capable of. That puts pressure on Earth's military and political leadership. I'm sorry, sir, Sarah said. I was just trying to save lives. Don't apologize, Martinez replied. You did exactly what any good pilot should do. The political consequences aren't your fault or your responsibility. That's for people like me to handle. But I want you to understand that your life is going to change. You're going to be in the spotlight whether you want to be or not. I understand, sir. Good. Now Commander Price has a proposal for you. I'll let her explain. Price stepped forward. Chen, I've been ordered to expand Ghost Squadron. Command wants to train more pilots to our standard. We're growing from 12 to 30 pilots over the next 2 years. I need experienced combat pilots to serve as instructors. I'm offering you a position as head instructor. Sarah's heart sank. That means I wouldn't be flying combat missions. Correct. You'd be training the next generation of Ghost Squadron pilots instead of fighting on the frontier. With respect, Commander, I'm a pilot. I belong in a cockpit, not a classroom. Price smiled slightly. I thought you'd say that. So here's the alternative. You continue as my second in command, flying missions when needed, but you also spend time training the new recruits, sharing what you know. It's not full-time instruction, but it's a contribution to the future of the squadron. Sarah thought about David Okonkwo, the young cadet on the Celestial Dream. She thought about all the young pilots who would join Ghost Squadron in the coming years, eager to prove themselves. I can do that, she said. Train them part-time while still flying. Yes, that works. Good, Martinez said. Because humanity is going to need pilots like you. The galaxy has seen what we can do. Some will respect it. Others will want to test it. We need to be ready for both. 3 weeks later, Sarah Chen stood in a simulator bay watching a new group of Ghost Squadron candidates run through training exercises. Most of them were struggling with the same scenario that David had mentioned, the one where they were outnumbered and had to survive through creativity. One young pilot, barely 19 years old, managed to take down 3 enemy fighters before his simulated ship was destroyed. He climbed out of the simulator looking frustrated. 3 isn't enough, he said to Sarah. You got 5. I got 5 because I'd been doing this for years, Sarah replied. You're just starting. 3 is impressive. And more importantly, you learned something from each death, right? The pilot nodded slowly. I need to be less predictable. I keep using the same evasive pattern. Good. Self-awareness is the first step to improvement. Run it again. Try something different. As the pilot climbed back into the simulator, Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction. This was important work. These young pilots would be the future of humanity's presence in the stars. If